And just also like, there might be a point where like maybe you're just kind of bored with raw lifting, or maybe you plateaued, or maybe you just want to try something different. Maybe you've been lifting for 3, 4, 5 years. I know like I did about 5 years of raw lifting before I did a bench only meet, my first equipped meet. And then it was kind of the same thing. And some of the people that I was training with, they were doing it, and it's like, here's a bench shirt. And I'm like, all right, this is cool.
Yep.
Whatever. And that's usually kind of like what happens. But yeah, there are places where you can go. There are like little groups. It's not as popular, but I do think, and I will, say, I think that as powerlifting gets more popular, and there's this kind of new generation of lifters. I think when they're 5, 6, 7 years in, they're going to get a little beat up. They might get stale. They might plateau. And I think that more people are going to be drawn to the lifting. And outside the U.S., sometimes the single ply and equipped lifting is actually even more popular.
Yeah, huge in Europe.
It's a lot more. There's definitely a big, in lifting, it's not even close. It's much more popular, which is fine. But it's just also like you don't necessarily have to, just because something's popular doesn't mean it's better or worse or anything. It's just you need to do what's good for you, and if it makes you happy and it makes you kind of, get excited about training, because that's really what it's all about. It's just giving you some positive focus, like we said, for self-improvement. So if that means wearing a bench shirt or going raw, like do what works for you, and feel free to try it out. If you don't like it, you could always just go back to something else.
It'd be easier to, if you're going to just try it out, easier to find somebody who has the equipment versus buying it and then regretting it.
That's true. Yeah, there's definitely a price tag, so there is a cost to it. So that's definitely, I wouldn't advise like going from your regular gym rat to getting like a $300 squat suit. Like you want to progress into it, and like a lot of even like some of our lifters, like one of our girls, she's just wearing a bench shirt and a pair of briefs that were like hand-me-downs, and she's wearing and it's like that's so it's very minimal, and she's just that's like and then eventually she'll probably get her own squat suit and stuff, but and she's doing great. She's approaching a 400 squat, she just hit a 400 deadlift, she's approaching like a 300-pound bench, so you could still do really well and like progress even with minimal. You don't need to get like the most crazy equipment right off the gate.
Right.
So the next thing I want to kind of talk about is you're kind of really quick, just kind of your experience competing on a big stage. You've only done a couple of meets in gear, but you were able to, you did hit a squat PR, which is great. Sometimes, you get to a big stage, you don't always have your best day, which is okay. I know you said like a lot of people were bombing out and stuff, so sometimes to put things in perspective, you hit at least one PR, which is good. And I know there's some kind of unfortunate things that maybe happened. I think like the spotter like kind of grip maybe touched you earlier and whatnot. But so maybe just tell us about like what was kind of some of the differences competing at a local meet versus at the Arnold at the XBC finals, and what that was like.
It's a huge difference. So this normally the meets I compete in are 3 flights of like 15 people. So there's a ton of guys, ton of girls, all in one session. So I have a lot of time in between my lifts.
Sure.
I have a lot of downtime, and that gives me time to recover. At the Arnold, it was 1 flight of 17 people, and after squat we were down 5 people, and then after bench we were down 5 more people.
Yeah,
so
I've seen that happen sometimes, and it's like, okay.
Right. So by the time I'm done squatting, as soon as I took my gear off, it was time to warm up for bench. Where normally I have about an hour and a half in between when I'm done squatting and when it's time to start warming up for bench. So I felt very rushed, which not a bad thing. I just think I need in the future to build my work capacity up a little bit.
And that's something, obviously, that piece of it is, and among other things, is kind of obviously out of your control.
Yeah.
And what I try to explain to people when you're in a situation like that, because I've seen this, the first time I saw that was actually, we had one of our older lifters, he was one of our bigger success stories, but Mark Greenstein, he was, at the time, he was top 5 all time at 198. He was a Raw Unity champion before. I don't even know if I'm not sure if I think they may still do it or not, but that was like kind of the big meet, like a couple of years ago, Raw Unity. People would kind of come together. That was kind of some of the biggest like Raw competition. I remember, people like Dan Green and stuff, Kevin Oak and all these other people would come. I think, I want to say even Rob Philippus, maybe all these people, Andrei Milanichev, I don't know if you guys remember Caitlin Trout, but anyway, I'm just kind of name dropping at this point. But so Mark, when he won Raw Unity, his meet was like it was like a 3-hour meet, Like it was like he was like it was just like I remember, and then we had one of our guys that was competing as well in his session. He almost missed his bench opener because like it was just moving so quick, and then there wasn't, So I mean, so he ended up I think he ended up hitting a squat and a bench PR, but he ended up like kind of totaling the same because the pulls didn't, because he didn't even. I remember he didn't even eat anything between bench and deadlift.
Right, and that was my issue here at SBC is I was very rushed. And normally I don't eat a ton on meet days anyway, but I'll force some food down. But I just didn't even have time.
Yeah, like you're not hydrated, so.
Yeah.
Now, so that being said, you're in the same situation as everyone else, so I think it's important when you're at that high level.
Absolutely.
You can't obviously control people bombing out and stuff, so that's gonna again make things go even quicker. You have to adapt, and like I said, it's a learning experience, and you kind of know for next time. Okay, this is kind of the hand I'm dealt. Maybe adjust obviously in gear. That even makes it even more challenging because maybe there's still a certain weight that you need to touch and all this stuff. Whereas a raw lifter, they can obviously open with whatever they want.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to if you're in a meet, you roll with the punches, especially if you're at a national level meet. Obviously if you could hit a PR total, that's always great. But when you're doing a more national level competition, hitting your best total for that day is going to obviously give you the best placing. So that should always be your first priority, and then obviously your individual personal PRs and things like that are great. So it just kind of depends on where you're at and what you're doing, but obviously the strategy is going to be a little different. If you're at a local meet and you're the only person in your division, obviously placing is really not that important at that point, and you're kind of more just competing for yourself, and maybe you could be a little bit more aggressive with your attempt selection and things like that. So these are just some things to consider if you are maybe looking to do at a more national level meet, or just or you're just competing against people versus, like I said, the mindset of just competing with yourself at a local meet or your first contest. So these are definitely all things to consider. But I think in general, not just in training but in life, always try to focus on the things you can control. So obviously the pacing of the meet. If whatever this was wrong. If you could focus on adjust accordingly, focus on what you can control. Focus on your execution, focus on a good setup and all that stuff, and then you'll obviously get the best result. And obviously, like I said, all things considering, you did hit a squat PR, and I think that second attempt moved really, really well, much better than it did
moved very
prior.
fast.
So there is some positives, and then you kind of, there's some things that we could work on moving forward. And like I said, the timing and stuff. And then, I've had that kind of issue too with some. I remember when I hit my, when I hit a 900-pound squat, I was kind of done after that, and it's I was that was one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of with the weight loss and stuff. If you can't make it through the meet, it doesn't really matter how strong you are. You know what I mean? Right. It's okay, great. You hit this big squat, and then you can't even kind of get to the deadlift. But regardless, of if you want to be super competitive or not. Having some sort of base of conditioning, and again, it's going to be different for everybody depending on what level you're at. But you want to at least be able to kind of partake. And you need a base level of conditioning just to kind of finish the meet. And then, if you have to adjust for the pacing and stuff, you have that kind of in reserve, and you can recover a little quicker, and you can kind of adjust to those scenarios and situations that much better. So I think that's a really good point. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to kind of add about of that, or some of the differences, or.
I also think nerves got to me a little bit. This meet for me was I didn't care as much about getting a PR in this or this or this. I knew PRing in all my lifts would give me the best chance of winning, but for me this was about I want to win. Yeah. This was the first meet where winning actually mattered. So I went in and I was very aggressive with my attempt selection. So my third attempt squat was supposed to be 850. That was the plan. But my second attempt moved so well, we jumped to 865.
Maybe a little, and then you kind of had now you have this 40-pound, gap.
So now it went up, but there was a little bobble. I got called for downward movement, and the spotters just got scared a little bit.
It seemed like the back spotter might have kind of tapped you.
Went in,
kind of threw you off a little bit.
I was pissed, but
out of your control.
And then that sort of killed my momentum just because I was a little down on myself. But going into bench, I missed my opener just because I didn't have my shirt set right, and then that again killed my momentum, and I was getting in my own head a lot. So that's something I definitely want to work on in the future. Is just again rolling with the punches. Wasn't a lot I wasn't used to. So on my second attempt bench, I took the same weight, fixed my shirt, got my head right, got my setup right, and then smashed. I mean, it was like an empty bar. So, and then moving on to my third attempt, again, got in my own head, like, am I gonna hit it? Am I gonna hit it?
Yeah,
when I need to go into it like, I'm gonna hit it.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got to deadlifts, I was gassed.
Kind of fried at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mentally,
like I said, it's unfortunate, and like I said, I was a little surprised with that too, because I know that the deadlifts actually looked really, really good all cycle, but
Yeah.
at that point, from between the mental fatigue and the actual physical fatigue of those misses and the pacing, it's kind of, it'd be tough for anyone at that point.
Right.
But it's good, and I think as an athlete and just as a person, I like to use that kind of quarterback analogy. If a quarterback kind of gets sacked, like you got to like focus on like the next play. Like you can't like worry about like you got to like worry about especially. So you got to kind of gather yourself and just focus on. So if you miss like an attempt or something goes wrong, you just got to focus on the next attempt. And that can be hard, and that's a skill. But that is something. The mental stuff is something you could work on. Again, it takes a really good veteran lifter to be able to kind of block that out and stuff, and not like get in your own head. But there are strategies and stuff that you could do for that. And again, it's a part of that is just experience.
Yeah. So going into it next year, I got to requalify, which sucks, but that's something that just again rolling with the punches. I just got to do it. So I'll when I requalify, going back again, I'll have more of an experience in mind and what I need to expect and what I need to do to actually execute.
Yeah, and once you've kind of been there and done that, and you've kind of experienced like I used to coach wrestling. And trained a lot of wrestlers, and it's like sometimes the first time you're at the counties or first time you're at the states, it's kind of like you're like a deer in headlights. But then once you've kind of been there, it's like you feel like you belong there. The first time it's kind of like, oh, I'm here. Okay, this is like it's kind of so it's
exactly
like
it.
But then like once you've kind of experienced, you've been there, you've been at the venue and stuff. It's just a little bit different, and the nerves kind of So if you can kind of get that out of the way, all right. Done that, I know what it's like, and I know what to expect. It's definitely a little bit easier kind of the second time around for sure, and you can kind of build on that for sure. So I think that's a really good point. And that goes for anything. It's like experience is huge. And there's always another meet. You know what I mean? You have to I think a lot of times people get so caught up with like this is like gotta be the meet. You know what I mean? And it's like well, unless you're maybe like some really old masters lifter that it's more likely than not, you're going to have another shot at it. So don't put so much pressure on yourself. Focus more on execution, focus more on the process, and a lot of times you're going to have a better result that way. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and maybe just talk about a little bit of like your schooling, what your goals are, and then maybe some advice that you have. So I know like you did, like you went through kind of an internship program here in like a private setting. You're doing more the collegiate setting now, and just talk about maybe like some things that you've kind of learned, and maybe some advice for people that are, I guess like, obviously you're kind of in it right now, but maybe some things that maybe some aha moments that you've kind of learned or whatever, or some advice for people starting out that are like looking to get into coaching, looking to get into maybe exercise science and that sort of thing.
So being an exercise science major, you are just inundated with information. There's every professor has, this textbook, you need to learn this and this and this, and a lot of that, unfortunately, just isn't as real world applicable as I would like, because I'm great at learning the textbook, I'm great at taking the test.
How can I use this information?
Right. Yep. So having coaching experience here as an intern and having coaching experience in a collegiate setting as an intern, you learn what is actually applicable to the athletes. Now, they were two very different internships. One is basically strictly powerlifting, and one is, prepping athletes for their competition, their individual sports. But I'm learning that everybody is different, and life doesn't always fit the textbook.
Yeah.
That's
very
so. It's been huge for me learning that, and another thing I've learned is that I got sort of stuck in this powerlifting mindset. Powerlifting is the only way to get strong. It's not. It's my favorite way. Or just
you don't want to put your bias on.
Right.
Like let's say it's a client or an athlete you're working with, and we always try to everything's context specific.
Yeah.
So this is something that let's say if someone, for example, I don't know if you was talking about you might have an athlete squat to a box, and then the powerlifter might see that and be like, why the hell, this is stupid or whatever. That's a whole other thing. But it's well, there's no barbell like on the field. You know what I mean? Like what's you always have to ask yourself what's the intent? Like what's the goal here? So maybe like I'm trying to develop stronger legs. Maybe I'm trying to improve their sprinting speed. Maybe I'm trying to improve their vertical jump. So if you kind of understand like the why, because a lot of times you just see this snapshot or we see this video or whatever, and we don't really understand like what the context is. So understanding a little bit more about the people that they're working with and what their job is, I think is really important. So I think that's good. So maybe
Definitely.
you can kind of talk about that a little bit and maybe like what you were expand on
So
what you were saying before.
a lot of the athletes I'm working with are, we're a D1 school, so there's a lot of like overseas athletes that come in, especially with the sports I work with. I work with soccer, I work with men's tennis, and then volleyball. They're a lot of European athletes are coming over, and a lot of them have never been in a weight room. So a big thing for them is just getting strong. Period. So powerlifting is a great way to do that because it builds a very good general base of strength. But then when you have the athletes that are already getting stronger and they're peaking for their competition season, I'm working with, again, in-season and out-of-season athletes. Training with the out-of-season athletes is much different than the in-season. And then the in-season people, it's really just maintaining their strength, keeping them peaked, and you have to prioritize certain things. So like something I got not yelled at for, but sort of reminded of isn't the most important thing is that the athletes don't need to be pushing intensity all the time. I'm saying, oh, that was easy, load the bar up. But you have to remember what's going on outside of the weight room. They're not training in a vacuum. They have practices, they have shoot-arounds, they have classes, they have their own stresses, their family life. They have a lot of things going on. So learning that has been huge for me too. And I have to adjust how I'm interacting with the athletes to.
And I think depending on the sport too, like if they're more of a power athlete or more of an endurance athlete, where they kind of fall on that spectrum, there is value for doing a sub-maximal weight with a lot of intent and trying to produce the most force possible. So having something maybe like look easy, there may be some like positive benefit to that for certain athletes and at certain times in the training.
Versus just loading the bar up.
Yeah, like absolute strength is not always the most important quality, let's say for a soccer player. Whereas if you're a power lifter, or if you're something maybe closer to that, absolute power side of the spectrum, like a shot putter or like a discus thrower, then absolute strength absolute strength is going to be a little bit more important for them, but still like not as important as a power lifter or like a weightlifter. So you have to kind of figure out like where they fall on the spectrum. Yeah. And if you're like a cross country runner, then absolute strength is not really like it can help. It will help to a degree, but it's not like the most important like quality for them. So I think these are all like important things to consider, and I think that's really good because I think people get so like almost religious about exercise. Like this is how a squat should be done. It has to be done below parallel. This is like you're whatever. They didn't pause the bench or whatever the case may be. And all that stuff is fine, or that a trap bar deadlift's not a real deadlift, but it's like, okay, that's great. So yes, a straight bar deadlift's gonna have higher transfer to a power lifter because that's their competition lift. But if someone, if your competition exercise is like throwing a javelin, then it doesn't really matter if you use a trap bar or a straight bar and you're still just trying to work their hips or whatever the goal is. These are things to kind of keep in mind. So I think that's really good. I think it's good that you're gonna learn a lot by doing. So I think as a coach, competing in something, it doesn't have to be powerlifting, but competing in something is good because then you kind of understand like what the athlete is going through, and that's one of my driving forces for why I still compete. I'm not trying to be Larry Williams. I'm not, but I think for me, if I could work on my self-improvement and improve myself, then I kind of have a better understanding of what our team is going through, and I think that also you kind of earn the respect to the athletes. I'm sure I'm sure the athletes that you're working with, they like you see, you squat 800, you squat 825. They probably they probably hold you to a different standard than someone that's telling them something. They may be really book smart, but they're not actually kind of like walking the walk. Yeah. So I think that's really important if you are looking to train other people, that you kind of lead by example. You got to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. So you need that scientific background, but you also need that hands-on experience. So doing something like an internship. We offer internships here if anyone's interested that's listening. And obviously you can look up internships in your area if you're not local. And just going to seminars, going to events. And there's nothing wrong, like for me, like when I was starting out, like I visited, I remember I spent a week in Massachusetts, and I spent time with like Eric Cressy and Mike Boyles and all this stuff. And I would travel. I've been to Westside Barbell numerous times, and you don't just like watching a YouTube video is great, but like actually like go there. So if you want to be a really good like football strength coach, find someone. Maybe you try to get in touch with someone like Joe Ken or something like that. If you want to. Like I said, be really, someone like my buddy Zach Evanesh works with a lot of wrestlers. Go to New Jersey, go to, Underground Strength Gym, all this stuff.
What's great about these people is most of them are super accessible, even though they might, we might hold them to, like put them on a pedestal that they're these amazing strength and conditioning coaches. Like, oh, they would never talk to me. They will. Yeah. Like everyone is very reachable. They want to help. So. Yeah, I
think the best guys are the most humble, and like I said, being as like. It's in our nature as coaches that we want to help people. That's why we do this. At the end of the day, we want to try and help people get better. So if there's any way we can help, don't be afraid to reach out. That's why we do what we do. So I think that's probably a good place to kind of wrap up. But just really quick before we close out, maybe if you have some advice, if someone's kind of just starting out lifting, like some advice do you kind of give them to help kind of get them going?
Into lifting? I would say find something you enjoy. Something I take from Stan Efferding, and that my favorite quote from him is that he gets a lot of questions. What's the best leg exercise to do? The one you'll do. What's the best diet to follow? The one you'll follow.
Consistency.
So find something you like and crush it.
Yeah.
So if you like powerlifting, crush it. If you just like going to the gym, just go to the gym. You're going to improve yourself either way. It doesn't really matter. If you're not training for something specifically, just get in the gym and, find stuff you like, find exercise you like, just do them. That's how I started out. Like I hated benching, so I squatted all the time. Now I'm a really good squatter. Yeah. I'm an okay bencher,
it's funny how that works. But it's like the thing that you put effort into, you get better at.
Right. So, but if you're going to put some effort into something, put all your effort into it. Really I'm trying to drive that point home.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. So, find something you enjoy, stick with it, go for it, run with it, and do it as long as you can. And if you don't really love it, try something else, But give it a chance, like try it out.
But nothing's set in stone. Like you can always just do something else.
You can always change course.
Right.
All right. So if I don't know if you care to do this or not, but where can people find more about you?
You can follow my Instagram, Lou_Bon_220. You can friend me on Facebook if you want, or if you go to Hofstra, come say hi.
Say hello, get a lift in. All right, cool. All right, well, thanks so much, Lou, for coming on the show today. I think this was really good. I think this can help a lot of people. If this interview did help you, please share it. Please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Helps other people find us. Make sure you subscribe as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.